your audio now.
Hi,
There you are. How you doing, Judy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy that you're able to join me right now. It's been a crazy couple of weeks, and I know you're a busy gal, so having you here is awesome and seeing you in the flesh.
Isn't it wonderful that we're learning how to do all these things? I just think for an old lady like me, it's just so interesting at every turn. So
It is. It's the new way of connecting, and I've been doing a lot of these interviews the last little while, and it's actually I'm having more connection than I've ever had before, actually. So
I
it's
think
kinda
that
cool.
I think that's very true. I think that because we don't have every option available to us. Seth Godin wrote about that today. That
Mhm.
we're more focused on using the options that we have and using them more effectively. I mean, if you've got everything on the planet to choose from,
Mhm.
including getting on an airplane, I mean, it's just all these choices. Now we just don't have that many choices, so we can use the ones we have more effectively.
That's right. It's excellent. It's a really cool thing. There's lots of really cool changes, and so now I want to be very clear. Were we going to be discussing the interrupter, the essential, and the interesting today?
Yes, ma'am. That's the three topics that we're talking about, and then a final thought.
Okay.
So yes, those are the things we're talking about. Um, Boy, what an interrupter!
Hmm.
Woo! Um, Even if there was somebody alive today, and there may be a rare one who experienced the 1918 flu pandemic, it was such a different world then that it wouldn't make any difference. We just have no precedent for this at all. And I am because my thinking for so long has been related to beginner's mind, the Zen Buddhist concept. Um, my view has been, as I sort of got over the panic of this and said, "Oh, what is this all about? How is it going to be?" Once I sort of settled into it, that practice, that thought of beginner's mind reasserted itself. So what that means is, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the experts, there are few. So what I've been trying to think about, and I just wrote about this in my newsletter, is how do we how do we accept all of the possibilities, some of which are very frightening. Not all the possibilities are good ones. So I guess what that means in the smallest sense with the garden center is, how does this interrupt our "this is how we've always done it" mentality? It's been extraordinary to watch some of the forward-thinking garden centers, Lockwood's in New York, East Coast Garden Center out on the Delmarva Peninsula, Arugio's in Dayton, Massachusetts. It's been extraordinary to watch them grab onto social media, pre-priced items that can be picked up, all kinds of opportunities. But the fact is, we could have been using those all along. These are options that we could have availed ourselves of all along. And what I'm hoping is that these options become a part of our everyday thinking, that we don't just say, well, we're going to get through this and then we'll go back to the same old way. Um, I've always, as you know, I've always been a proponent, strong proponent of in-store events and event marketing and so forth. But just as you and I are proving today, I just touched my face.
You're home. You're okay. You probably washed your hands 1,000 times, and the only thing you've touched is your own doorknob, so you're good.
Um, but as I've been thinking about this, we know that somebody like the Garden Answer Girl, who has been doing such a great job with consumers, we know that consumers love those kinds of interactions.
Mm.
So something as simple as, we can hold an event like a container garden workshop online, and then the customer can come by and pick up the kit. We can have the kit ready. So I'm hoping that what this interruption does for us is cause us not to, we'll do this for a little while and then we'll let it all go, to actually add these skills into our set, so that we can use them on and on and on and on and on, particularly for the younger customer. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just an amazing opportunity to be on Facebook and to be out there in ways that maybe garden centers hadn't really focused their attention on. So I'm not, um, I'm not, I can't see this as a good thing,
Mhm.
but I can only see, how do we manage it? What is the method that we manage it for our businesses? And I think there's some extraordinary opportunities out there. I hope you're hearing that from some of your other, from some of the other people that you're talking to.
Absolutely. And I think too, like right now it is a crazy time, and spring is happening, in a wave across up to the north.
Yeah.
And everybody goes into that 8 week, and I refer to it as, for us here in Vancouver, it's between middle of April to middle of June. It's a 8 week to 10 week push, and it's insane, and everything's coming all at the same time. So maybe you're using, and especially right now with all the curbside and everything that's happening, they're using all their extra labor, that they don't have that person that can stand in front of a camera and do that for Facebook. Exactly. But at the same time too, where they can, they should, but use this also later in those downtime months, because that's a great opportunity at that point. Now we got a little bit of time, our sales are down, we can create these kits, we have somebody who can get in front of a camera and set this all up, and now we can do this throughout the whole year and not just be relying on that 8 week block of sales.
I think that's true. What we've learned from people like the Sill is that people like to buy plants year round. Woohoo! What a wonderful thing. Um, if we can tap into that by using these new skills that maybe we didn't have,
Mhm.
I'd like to see that 8 week myth go away.
Right.
That's one of those, this is how we've always done it concepts, is we got to make our money during this time and then we have to make do the rest of the year. I just don't believe it. I believe that's much that exists between our ears, not our ears, not the consumer's ears.
Mhm.
I think they'd like to have fresh, living things all year round. And the indoor garden, of course, is the big opportunity. But in a lot of parts of the country, the outdoor garden is too. We have lots of opportunities for things that could be outdoor interest that we could talk about. But that 8 week mindset is one of those big, this is how we've always done it concepts that I think have been very, very limiting, and that this thing maybe might just blow up,
Yeah.
and we can say, okay, now we can use these skills that we were forced almost
Hmm.
to develop, but now we can use them. So I'm hoping for that. I'm hoping that's going to be the case. Um, it certainly is gratifying watching what some of these garden centers are doing. Um, and I don't want to sound like an old lady with a broke record, but boy, that email list has sure gotten to be valuable, hadn't it?
Yes.
That some people just had to, with just had to be kicking and screaming to get themselves to ask people for their emails, which at this point consumers expect to provide. They don't want to hide that. So I think that email list is just going to be extraordinarily valuable to consumers. So I hope it is anyway. So
Absolutely. Now, the one thing that we were discussing previously is that we're talking about essential.
yes,
And I mean, while we're not going on that topic so far as to say, are we considered essential in this province or that state? It's the idea of that whole wellness piece of, establishing ourselves as being essential in this industry. We've talked about it for many, many years, but this is a time to really man up on it.
it is. The Garden Media Group has taken a leadership role in this concept for years, about how important the garden is in terms of wellness, and how consumers are more and more and more and more and more interested in wellness. That's where yoga and health spas and all of these services come from that people are interested in, and medicines, of course, and lots of things that come into that wellness. But we have been a part of that forever, but we have not messaged it. We have not made it a part of our messaging, and we really have an opportunity here to talk about that essential wellness and the concept of the garden. All the research is there, anecdotally and in all kinds of communications from scientists as to what the garden does, both indoors and out. I mean, we know that. So I think that being able to think about that wellness and message it is important. You will feel better if you have a plant.
Mhm.
Okay, that's just the basics of it.
Mhm.
What kind of plant that is doesn't really matter. But again, with the plant, taking the fear of the plant, okay, so it dies. Well, we got another one. It's okay. This is not the end of the world. So being able to tap into that wellness is, I think, and I would urge everybody to go back and take a look at the garden media reports from several years. They're free,
Mhm.
and you can look at them and see what this messaging has been about. But the information is out there if we want to try to, if we want to try to grab hold to it. I think that if we, I don't have any research on this, so you may not want to share it with anybody, but it's just possible that in some of those states that limited the garden centers opening, that one of the concerns was how tight the spaces are in those stores. There's not room. I'm a broke record, but if the aisle is only 4 feet wide, you got a problem. So if we could think about those issues, I think it's going to be a long time before once this becomes part of our psyche, this social distancing, I think it's going to take a long time for people to want to go back to the butt brush.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to like it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a place there for garden centers to address some of these physical issues as a part of this new way of thinking about how the customer accesses the store.
Yeah. Well, there's been like a lot of people are imposing these directional signs that says this aisle is one way, this aisle is this way. I was very concerned at the way the annual house was set up, because we've always had it so that it's exactly 2 cars. We have such a small space. 2 cars can pass easily to get through there, and I've measured it all out, get my yardstick out. But what the problem is that you can't do that now. You can only go down one way, and we have these long rows.
Of
And
course.
I'm stuck in my little 6-foot slot while Mrs. Jones is busy trying to figure out what tomatoes she wants, and the person behind me is barreling up behind me, and I feel trapped, and I'm not having a good experience now. And the idea here is not to be meandering. This is about being efficient, organized, and stocked well so that it's easy and flow. So you got to space this out. You got to break your racks up. You got to have ways to get in and out, in and out. There's got to be a way to get that body out of there. They can't be just going stuck in a row. And it's kind of like, when you go into a drive-through and you're like, this lineup's going to be forever, but now I can't back up. So they got to think about that.
The customer they'll leave the cart and they'll leave.
Yeah.
They get in those uncomfortable positions, they'll just abandon the cart and leave. Yeah. And we can certainly organize, in many ways. The customer flow pattern is one of the things that I've been begging people to think about for years, because what the customer would really like to do is simply move forward. They don't want to have to turn around. They just like to move forward. But to do that, as you say, you can't trap them in a 40-foot aisle.
Yeah.
Where they can't move somewhere else. You've got to give them more options. So again, if we can apply some of this stuff now, I think we'll see people much more comfortable with coming into the stores. I think that lack of comfort is going to last a long time, whether it's imposed by outside forces or whether it just becomes part of our thinking. I think that as we shop, I think that this whole 6-foot concept is going to stay with us for a while. So I think that's an important thing to really think about. Yeah,
exactly.
It is. Yeah.
So when the last thing that we were chatting about recently was, and I liked how you worded this, is about not just making your backyard tidy or pretty, making it interesting.
That's correct. I had an extraordinary conversation with a young woman that is a close friend of mine. She's enough to check in on me and find out how I'm doing and so forth. She's also at home because the schools are closed. And she made the comment, I was asking her about the children and how she's doing. She's got 2 very active children. How are they doing? She said, well, we have an interesting backyard, and that makes a huge difference. And I thought, that's true for everyone. If you think about the difference between a landscape, which is pristine and manicured and maybe sprayed and maybe this, whatever it is, it's often something that you look at. A garden, in contrast, is something that you put yourself into. You are part of it. It's a 3-dimensional space. And if that garden is diverse enough, then you will have birds and butterflies and insects and maybe an amphibian or a fish, or you will have that interesting diversity of that animal and insect life and the plants. And so that's a part of what I'm hoping will be a change in the way we think about the garden. I am a devotee of the writer and conservationist Wendell Berry, and Wendell Berry says in one of my favorite pieces, he says, breathe with unconditional breath the unconditioned air. Communicate slowly. He says, live a 3-dimensioned life. Well, if there's any place that can be a 3-dimensioned life, it's a garden. And I think that's a very important part of how we can think about this as people begin to think about how the garden is a place to interact with right now as an escape. And of course it is, and it's a retreat, but it's also a lively, interesting place to interact in. And I think that making the garden interesting is one of those messaging that we can tap into with pollinators and bees and all of that interest that the customer already has. So I'm hoping that we'll see some movement toward an interesting garden as opposed to a more pristine space.
And you said something that was interesting to me, like when you say like the whole 3D of experiencing life in 3D. And right now, me and you are doing this in a very 2-dimensional way of interacting. So we're craving that that extra dimension in our life, that depth.
That's correct. Wendell Berry says also in this piece, avoid screens. He comes right out and says it. So he is telling us that we can't, that 1-dimensional, that flat thing is not the way we want to interact.
No, not at all. And yet here we are.
Here we are, and enjoying it. Once again, we are responding to limitations.
Yeah.
You and I would much prefer to be sitting together at a restaurant or somewhere in British Columbia, chatting and having a glass of wine. We'd much prefer that. But without all those options, we are taking this one and making a good thing out of it. We're making it a useful part of what we do. And I think that's, for one thing, it's a learning experience. And if you can learn something new, oh my goodness, it doesn't matter what it is. Just learn something new. Even if it's just how to get on Zoom, which I think this is only my 3rd time on Zoom. So I'm
you're a pro.
I'm getting to be an expert now.
Exactly, you're a pro. That's awesome. So Judy, let's try to wrap up with one of your final thoughts. What is your biggest takeaway from this experience that we've been going through?
The most important thing for me, both for the garden and the garden center, is that the garden and the garden center are both solitude and community. We know that people have gone to garden centers just to wander around and look at the flowers and have a cup of coffee. So we know that the garden center and the garden have been both solitude and they have been community. And I would like to suggest that that is exactly how we need to think about who we are as an industry going forward. We are a source of solitude and respite and community. And if we could make that our mission statement to be both respite and community, and think about how we can incorporate that into the store, into our communications, I think we can really learn from this. And after all, right now, all you need is 6 feet,
Mhm.
even though you and I are doing this over 3,000 miles. So somewhere in that span of 6 feet
Mhm.
and 3,000 miles
Mhm.
is both solitude and community.
Mhm.
And I'm resting in that thought and resting in putting it into my work, because obviously on-site collaboration has been my the hallmark of my work. I go to the store and meet with the customer, and we're there, and I spend 3 days with them. That's not going to happen anytime soon. It may not happen again. We'll learn that as we go along. But if we remember, we're providing both solitude or respite, one of the two, for our customers, and community, and that's where we can position ourselves
Mhm.
with our customers' interest, like wellness. As long
Mhm.
as we keep tapped into their interest, we can create community.
Mhm.
So that's what I'd like to see us do.
That I love that. That's a really nice ending thought. I love that. Solitude and community all in
And
one. Pull it all together.
that's what we're after. I'll be writing about it in my newsletter and over other places. And I'm also working on some videos, some short videos for proven winners, that will allow me to address some of those themes, but also bring that down to how do you use the resources at hand to do some of these things.
Mhm.
So fortunately, we have extraordinary resources now that we did not have even 10 years ago, that we did not have, from our vendors and from our suppliers. So I'm hoping people will tap into those and use them even more efficiently and more effectively to create that respite and community.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that like I've almost got my website ready to go. So it's connecting all of these industry experts with industry pros, and there's so many resources out there, and I'm just trying to put it all into kind of one place so it's easy to find.
Good, good. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for including me in that company. I appreciate it.
Oh, Judy, it's a pleasure. Honestly, you're one of my favorite people for sure. So
My goodness, say it again.
you are one of my favorite. Thank you. Hey, talk to you later.
Yes, I'll look forward to it, Shelley.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.